Joining me now is today's panel. Kate Santalese, congressional reporter for Axios. Mo Elleithee, Democratic strategist and executive director of Georgetown's Institute of Politics and Public Service. And Mark Bednar, Republican strategist who served as head of communications for former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Thank you all for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. And Kate, I want to start with you. Who do you think can take the mantle from Lindsey Graham as a liaison between the White House and Senate Republicans?
Right. It's a good question. He did play such a big role in the Senate. He was willing to work across the aisle in a way that a lot of Republican senators weren't willing to do. And we've seen that by all of the warm remarks from his Democratic colleagues in the Senate now. In terms of his replacement, we know that we have a few interested candidates among South Carolina Republicans, including Congresswoman Nancy Mace, William Timmons, Ralph Norman, Russell Fry. So they're all going to be running over the next few weeks, getting their campaigns ramped up. We know that the White House right now, they see Russell Fry as the #1 contender, their top favorite for this race. We know they're a little bit also sour on Congresswoman Nancy Mace as well, who jumped into the race a little early yesterday after news just broke of Senator Graham's passing. But it's big shoes to fill in the Senate. He certainly worked across the aisle a lot and got a lot done during his time.
And Mace broke with the president, or at least somewhat, over the Epstein files, so she has that to overcome. Mark, does Graham's death make John Thune's job that much harder?
Well, that seat will be replaced by a Republican. Basically, Senator Graham, the biggest legacy that he leaves is that one of the few people on Capitol Hill these days that he learned that in order to spend political capital, you need to accrue it, you need to gain it. And in an age of Instagram and online fundraising, and we see kind of disparate interests throughout Republicans on the Hill right now, Lindsey Graham being able to actually say, let's get favors, let's work across the aisle, let's build coalitions, fight for when you need to fight, and work together when you need to work together. That is a ability to weave amongst coalitions that, those are going to be huge shoes to fill.
And speaking of shoes to fill, Mo, Graham was, of course, a fierce Trump ally, but he was also seen as someone who could work across the aisle, who was willing to work with Democrats on some things. Who do you think fills that void for Democrats in the Senate now?
There's not a lot, right? There are not a lot of, in sort of this era where so many elected leaders are penalized by their base voters if they are seen working across the aisle. Lindsey Graham was one of the rare ones who figured out how to do it, who figured out, not on everything, and there was plenty of stuff that Democrats disagreed vehemently with him on. But maybe one of the most telling is on when it comes to Ukraine and the fact that he actually dragged the president, who was very reluctant to jump out there on behalf of Ukraine. He dragged the president closer and closer. He brought this Russia sanctions bill to the 1-yard line and sadly passed away before he could get it over the goal line. Will anyone else in the Republican caucus pick up that mantle and run with it? Remains to be seen. It would be tragic for his legacy. It would be tragic for the world if they can't get there.
Mark mentioned that, this will be a Republican seat in the fall. Do you agree? Is there any way a Democrat can win here?
I stopped making predictions over a decade ago when Donald Trump was first elected. So much depends on who the Republican nominee is, and this is a wave year. And if it's somebody like a Nancy Mace, for example, that could make this race a little bit more competitive. So,
is that your endorsement for Nancy Mace?
Nice way to put it, yeah.
I will just say that it's folly for any of us to make too many predictions these days.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit. And Kate, Senator Mitch McConnell finally broke his silence yesterday over his hospitalization. His office released a photo of him with his wife, along with a statement that read, "Last month I took a fall, which landed me in the hospital. My doctors have confirmed that I didn't break any bones or suffer concussion. I didn't have a heart attack or stroke. I don't have any tumors or hemorrhages. But I was briefly unconscious and was taken to the hospital." He went on to say, "I've had to deal with a mild case of pneumonia." What do you make of the timing of the statement's release?
Well, it's really interesting, right? Because for the last few weeks, we've seen rampant conspiracy theories online about McConnell's health, whether he was conscious or even alive. We had Governor Andy Beshear, for example, call on him last week for transparency to say what was going on. Then we saw that series of phone calls with Leader Thune, Senator Barrasso, Scott Jennings, his former aide, where they all said they had spoken to him for a couple of minutes, 17, 20 minutes. And then that didn't really seem to quell any of the conspiracy theories, which is why we saw this photo released yesterday and this statement explaining what had happened. And one interesting thing to note about the photo is that there's a newspaper in it that shows the Sunday edition of the Washington Post sports section, which can show that the photo was taken recently. And that has seemed to quell some of the conspiracy theories. Some people are still claiming it's AI generated.
Right.
There's no evidence for that, though.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
the conspiracy theories running rampant, still on social media. Mark, do you think that the 4+ weeks of silence undermine McConnell's credibility here?
Well, as we've seen after 4 years of Joe Biden, the American people thirst for transparency, especially from aging leaders. After having been lied to basically by the entire administration about Joe Biden's health, it's pretty understandable that the American public does have skepticism about the health of their leaders. The more that government officials, to any degree, whether health or age or otherwise, can be transparent, that's for the better. And so the fact that at least he's out there now, like obviously we know he's not running for re-election. Andy Barr is going to take his spot in the Senate. But yeah, of course, transparency is always important.
Should he have released a video?
Yeah, he had the statement. I don't know where he felt appropriate, but more transparency is better. We saw that also even with when Dianne Feinstein in her remaining years in the Senate. There's all these questions that happen, and it's transparency is good for the American public.
Mo, when it comes to the transparency argument, if Democrats wanted to make it, do they have a tougher time making it, given the previous health concerns over President Biden?
And I think I'm glad to hear Mark say what he said, because I think there are a lot of Republicans who are giving McConnell a pass who did not give Joe Biden, did not give Lloyd Austin a pass, Secretary of Defense, when he didn't tell people that he was undergoing a medical procedure. It was wrong when the Democrats in charge did not show transparency. It is wrong whether it is Mitch McConnell, whether it is as Congressman Kaine in New Jersey did not kept their constituents in the dark for a long time. I do believe public officials deserve a certain level of privacy. And I understand men of a certain age certainly don't like to share like to be open about their medical conditions. But I can't think of any other job where you would hide from your boss for weeks and weeks and weeks that you weren't what your condition was. All of these individuals have kept it from their boss, and that hurts the credibility of government. That hurts the credibility of the institution.
And turning to Maine, Democrats announced details for their convention to replace Graham Plattner as their candidate in the Senate. It's going to take place on July 25th. It will include more than 600 delegates from all 16 counties in Maine. Mo, what would you consider a successful convention?
A nominee who is not named Graham Plattner. That is first and foremost. Good riddance to Graham Plattner. I was never on board the Plattner train. The guy was clearly a train wreck as a candidate. So I think what we want is a candidate. We see polling that shows generic Democrat defeats Susan Collins. Now, a generic Democrat won't win. But if there's somebody who can harness the anxiety of Democratic voters, can deliver a coherent change message, and can put together the mechanics of a campaign quickly, that's the candidate who has a good shot at defeating Susan Collins.
The word quickly, Kate, if Graham Plattner's vetting was seen as an abject failure, do Democrats run the risk of nominating a candidate here who would face even less scrutiny or vetting, given the fact that this process is being rushed?
I think that's a big concern right now among Democrats and a big topic about how to make this nominating process more transparent. I mean, we're already seeing infighting between some moderate and progressive wings of the Democratic Party. We have about 6 candidates running right now who are all kind of framing themselves as outsider candidates, trying to court Plattner's voters, but also towing that line of trying to distance themselves from him. So this is not going to be a smooth sailing, easy process for anyone involved here. And they really don't have a lot of time. They only have until July 27th to pick a new nominee.
And Mark, do you think Susan Collins should feel more or less safe now than she did a week ago?
I think she's safe no matter what. You're asking a bullfighter if she's ready for the next bowl, and she is. But as far as these candidates go, it's not just candidates who are running. They're also scrambling to find delegates, too. So you're going to find an ideological sort of Frankenstein's monster that's going to come out of this Democratic convention, because they're going to have to do all this sort of horse trading in order to get all these delegates who are being newly anointed aligned. So I think the circus in the Democratic Party in Maine is understated, and it's only going to get more wild as the days and weeks go on.
But would you say it's a healthier process than say what happened in 2024 when the entire party establishment anointed Kamala Harris and did not go through, right? This is at least going to be a process where more people will be involved in selecting the nominee, and I think that is a good thing for the party.
All right. I'll have to leave it there. Mo, Mark, Kate, thank you so much for joining us here on the panel. And thank you all for watching at home. I'm Gabe Gutierrez, and we are back tomorrow.